It's a Tuesday morning, 1962. The light coming through the kitchen window is that particular pale gold that only happens in early September. Not quite summer anymore, not yet fall. A percolator is going on the stove. Somewhere outside, a screen door bangs shut. A woman is standing in front of a small mirror hung on the bedroom wall. Not a vanity, just a mirror, about the size of a piece of notebook paper. She's pinning her hair. She dabs on lipstick. A peachy coral color, comes in an orange tube. She clips on a pair of small pearl earrings from a dish on the dresser. She's going to the grocery store. That's all. Just the grocery store. And she looks, without trying, without spending, without thinking much about it at all, like a woman who takes herself seriously. Most people watching this remember that world, or remember watching their mothers live in it. The pressed collar on an ordinary Wednesday, the house dress with a little shape to it, the way women just showed up to their day like it meant something. And somewhere between then and now, that habit quietly disappeared. Nobody made an announcement. Nobody held a meeting. It just went. Today, we're going to walk back through the small, specific ways women dressed for everyday life in the 1950s and 1960s. Not the special occasions, not the Sunday best, the ordinary days. And by the end, I think you'll understand, maybe for the first time, exactly what we lost when we stopped.
The name is misleading. The house dress wasn't what you wore to clean the baseboards. It was the baseline, the minimum, what you put on before you left the house for anything at all. A cotton shirtwaist, usually. Simple cut, a little waist to it, buttons down the front. They cost almost nothing, $1.80, $2 at JCPenney's. They came in soft colors, sage green, dusty rose, pale yellow with white collar trim. But here's the thing nobody thinks about anymore. You ironed it. Every time. Not because you had somewhere special to go, just because that was the floor, not the ceiling. Today we have athleisure. $12 leggings engineered for comfort. There's nothing wrong with that. But the house dress had a kind of quiet dignity that's worth remembering.
Jewelry wasn't saved for evenings out. For most women in this era, a pair of clip-on earrings was as automatic as shoes. Not expensive jewelry, not heirlooms. Little plastic or faux pearl clips you could buy at the Five and Dime for 35 cents. White, cream, sometimes a soft tortoiseshell. You kept them in a dish on the dresser, a small glass dish or a saucer you'd repurposed, and you clipped them on the way out the door the same way you'd grab your keys today. It was the smallest possible act of intention, a 2-second decision that said, I'm going somewhere. I'm a person going somewhere. Nobody would have called it fashion. They would have just called it getting ready.
There was no such thing as a different coat for running errands versus going somewhere nice. There was your coat. One coat. Maybe two if you were lucky. A lighter one for fall, a heavier one for January. It was usually wool. Usually a solid color. Camel, charcoal, deep burgundy. Bought to last. Structured at the shoulder, with a real lining you could feel when you slipped your arms in on a cold morning. Women took care of that coat, the way you'd take care of anything you intended to have for a decade. Hung properly, brushed, kept away from the damp. Today we have fast fashion. $20 jackets you wear twice and forget. The one good coat life wasn't deprivation. It was a different relationship with things entirely. And this one surprised me the most when I thought back on it.
This is the one that stops people cold when you mention it.
Women dressed up for the laundromat. Not in their finest, no, but in something pressed, something presentable. You simply would not walk out of the house in what you'd slept in. The thought would have genuinely puzzled most women of that era. Not scandalized them, puzzled them. Like being asked why you'd leave the house without your shoes. The laundromat was a public place. Public places required a certain presence. A green cotton shirtwaist, a cardigan that matched, hair done, or at least pinned tidily. There's something interesting buried in that habit. It suggests that how you appeared in the world, even at the laundromat on a Tuesday, was tied up in self-respect in a way that had nothing to do with vanity and everything to do with showing up.
Not every woman wore much makeup in daily life, but lipstick was different. Lipstick was almost universal. In the 1950s and early 1960s, a woman leaving the house without lipstick felt, to most women, slightly unfinished, like a sentence without a period. The colors were specific to the decade: coral, cherry red, soft raspberry, a brownish rose they called nude. Revlon, Tangy, Hazel Bishop, which advertised itself as the lipstick that stayed on. You kept one in your purse, always. A small gold or silver tube, usually worn smooth at the bottom from weeks of handling. You didn't need a mirror. After a while, you could apply it by feel, cap it, and drop it back in your bag before the traffic light changed. It took 15 seconds. It cost 69 cents. And it was, somehow, everything.
If you lived in or near a city, gloves were still a regular part of going out well into the early 1960s. Not heavy gloves, light cotton ones, usually white or cream, that you wore to church, to shopping downtown, to lunch, if lunch was somewhere with a tablecloth. They cost almost nothing. You washed them by hand in the sink, rolled them in a towel to dry, and wore them again. What gloves communicated in the unspoken language of that era was that you understood there was a difference between private and public, between home and out in the world. The gloves were the marker, the small cotton-knit signal that said, I have made an effort because this moment is worth one. They went away fast once the 60s shifted, and almost no one noticed them go. But what comes next gets at something deeper, something about what getting dressed actually meant to women's sense of themselves. Men had their version of this too. In the 1950s and 1960s, a man's shirt collar was pressed flat and crisp before he went anywhere that wasn't his own backyard. Not just for work, for errands, for Saturday outings, for driving to the hardware store. Women pressed those collars. Sunday nights or early mornings, with a spray bottle of water and a heavy iron on the kitchen table. The smell of hot cotton and steam is one of those scents that, if you grew up in this era, takes you somewhere immediately. The pressed collar said, someone in this house takes pride in how this family appears. It was quiet work, invisible work, the kind of work that only gets noticed when it stops being done. This is another one that draws genuine disbelief today. Stockings, nylons, were expected in most public situations through much of the 1960s, not just for evenings or offices, for going out generally, shopping, church, visiting, lunch with a friend. They were difficult. They ran if you looked at them wrong. They required a garter belt, which required time and patience. In summer, they were genuinely uncomfortable. And yet, they were worn. Because bare legs in public, for most women in most of the country until the late 60s, simply wasn't done. It wasn't even a rule anyone had to state. It was just understood.
Pantyhose arrived around 1965 and changed everything. The miniskirt made garter belts impossible, and pantyhose made stockings bearable. And within a decade, stockings for everyday were gone almost entirely. Progress, mostly, but a quiet ritual, gone. In many households, hair was done before the day began, before the children came to the table, before anyone but the walls could see you. Not elaborate hair, a neat set, or a quick style, pinned back or pinned up, enough to go to the door if someone knocked, enough to step onto the porch, enough so that if your neighbor walked by, you looked like a woman in charge of her morning. There's something in that habit that's easy to call vanity from the outside, but from the inside, most women would have described it differently. It was armor, in the gentlest sense, a signal to yourself before anyone else. Today begins now. I am ready for it. I'll be honest, and I say this without any judgment at all. There's a little sadness in realizing how completely some of these habits vanished. Not because the habits themselves were so important, but because of what they carried with them. This deserves its own entry, because it was its own category. Not a work outfit, not a party outfit. The errand outfit. A specific skirt or slacks, worn, comfortable, but always clean and pressed, designated mentally for the bank, the dry goods store, the post office, the butcher. Women knew what their errand clothes were. They had a place for them in the closet. They reached for them automatically. The errand outfit was modest, but intentional. It cost nothing to maintain once you owned it. And it created, in a small way, a structure to the week. Getting dressed for errands was how you shifted from home mode to world mode. It was a transition ritual that nobody called a ritual. We've lost that transition. We roll from pajamas to car seat to store aisle without any pause in between. Whether that's freedom or loss probably depends on the day. Sunday clothes were different from errand clothes. Everyone understood that. Your church outfit was your best maintained, most carefully chosen item. For women, a good dress, a hat, the real shoes, not the everyday ones, the good ones, kept in the box, polished. For children, the outfit that was hung back up immediately upon returning home and could not, under any circumstances, be worn to play. The act of changing back out of church clothes the moment you came home was itself a ritual, a marker. Sacred time and ordinary time. The clothes held the boundary. There's something worth examining in that. We had a physical way of honoring the difference between kinds of time. A way of saying, this hour was set apart. The clothes said it before any words could. Hats faded from everyday life faster than almost any other item in this story. In 1955, a woman wore a hat to church, to shopping, to lunch, sometimes just downtown. By 1968, hats were almost gone from daily life entirely. 13 years. One generation. They were not expensive hats, mostly. A simple felt pillbox, a straw hat in summer, a knitted cap in winter that you'd made yourself from a pattern in Woman's Day. But they were worn intentionally, pinned or placed, and they completed an outfit the way nothing else quite did. When hats went, something in how women occupied public space went with them. The hat was vertical. It said, I am here. I take up space. Notice me, and I mean for you to. Bare heads feel freer, but something got quieter, too. One purse. Not a collection, not a rotation. One good purse. Usually leather or leather look, usually black or brown,
maintained carefully across years. You kept it clean, you repaired the clasp if it broke. You didn't throw it away because the season changed. It lasted until it genuinely could not last anymore. And then, if you were careful, and most women were, it lasted a little longer than that. Inside, a wallet, a handkerchief, a tube of lipstick, a small comb, a few coins. Nothing more. The purse closed properly. It sat in your lap at a lunch table and didn't slump or overflow or require excavation. There is an entire industry now built on the premise that women need many bags. Perhaps. But there was a different kind of confidence that came from the one good thing philosophy, an ease with having exactly enough. What comes next is the one I keep coming back to, the one that says the most about what all of this actually meant.
There was an ordinary afternoon, sometime around 1964, give or take a year. Harold's mother was visiting for the week. Nothing unusual. A mild woman, kind, the type who never asked for anything, and therefore you wanted always to give her things. She decided she wanted to go to the Sears catalog store in town. Nothing exciting about it. It wasn't even the real Sears, just the order desk, a small room with a counter and 2 chairs, and a woman behind a glass case. But there was a pie half done on the counter, laundry in the wringer, 3 things on the stove that needed watching. A woman in that situation today might have said, "Just let me grab my jacket," and walked out in what she was wearing. But not then. Not in that house, in that town, in that particular understanding of what it meant to go out. The pie was covered with a towel. The stove was turned down. And there was a change into the good brown wool skirt. Not the best, but a step up from the house dress. And the pearl clip earrings from the dish on the dresser. And a moment at the small mirror to make sure everything was as it should be. Harold's mother was waiting by the door. She looked over once, quietly. Didn't say anything at first. And then, just before they stepped outside, she said softly, "You're a good girl, Dot." That was all. 4 words. It wasn't about the skirt. Anybody with sense could see it wasn't about the skirt. It was about something that women of that generation understood without having to explain it to each other. That showing up presentably was a form of saying, "This moment matters. This afternoon matters. You matter, and I know it, and I'm showing you I know it by how I walked out the door." 4 words, and you can spend 60 years understanding them. At the very top of this list, above any specific item, the hat, the earrings, the pressed collar, the lipstick, is the act itself, getting ready. In the 1950s and 1960s, getting ready was not a luxury. It was not self-indulgence. It was not something you did when you had extra time or were going somewhere worth the effort. It was the effort. A small, daily, entirely accessible declaration that your day had a beginning, that you were a person stepping into the world, not just moving through it, that the hours ahead were worth meeting on purpose. It cost almost nothing. A good house dress, a tube of coral lipstick, a pair of clip earrings kept in a glass dish. These were not extravagances. They were discipline in the gentlest form. A morning ritual that gave shape to everything that followed. That is what we quietly set down somewhere along the way. Not the items, the intention behind them. Here is what I hope, if I'm honest. I hope someone watching this gets to the end and feels that small, warm pull toward themselves. Not toward 1962. You can't go back there, and most of us wouldn't want to, not for everything. but toward the version of a Tuesday morning where you pause for 5 minutes before you leave the house. Put on something that makes you feel like a person who has places to go. Clip on the earrings or the necklace, or whatever that thing is for you. Stand at the mirror, just for a moment. Not because anyone is watching, because you're watching. Because the day deserves a beginning. Because, and this is the thing that gets lost when we talk about this era as if it were only about restriction, you deserve a beginning. Well, we didn't know we were doing without. We just thought that was how living worked. Maybe some of it was. The good part. The part where getting dressed was a quiet way of saying, I'm here. I'm ready. This matters. Let's go. That part wasn't about the decade. It was about the dignity. And dignity doesn't have a cutoff here.
If this brought back a memory, a mother, a grandmother, a particular dress, or a smell of steam off a morning iron, I'd love to hear it in the comments. Those stories belong out in the world. And if you'd like to stay in this world a little longer, the next video is about the beauty rituals women kept quietly to themselves. The cold cream, the pin curls, the 100 brush strokes before bed. It's right there waiting for you.